Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate has 4 new Commander Precons, and though they all look pretty awesome, you may be wondering, should you buy them? Maybe 1 or 2 or all of them. So let's dive into just that. Please hit that like button, and if you do decide to buy any or just pick up some singles, check out Card Kingdom, who sponsors the channel. They are the place to go to pick up everything you need. Don't forget to use my affiliate link, which you can find in the description. Now let's get into what is happening in these decks, figure out which ones, if any, you want to buy. There are 4 decks, the first being Party Time, which focuses on the party mechanic and is led by Nalia, and it is the top pick for everyone at the moment because of the 2 new cards we'll check out in the review. Then we have Exit from Exile, led by Faldorn. It's red-green, exiles cards, makes a lot of tokens, and then you have big creatures to smash in like red-green beatdown usually does. Then there is my personal favorite, Draconic Dissent, led by Furkrag, and we are red-blue, and we do a whole lot of goading our opponents and keeping the chaos coming. Goading is great, hence why it is my favorite. Then last but not least is Mind FlayARRRs, led by Captain Negathrod. We are blue and black horror creatures, and this one is interesting, but more on that shortly. In a quick summary, all of these decks have good reprints, all look strong out of the box, but still have weak mana bases. Granted, they're all 2 colors, so it could be worse. I don't think there's any of these, though, that are not worth buying so long as they fit into your collection. Let's review them a bit more in depth to see if, in fact, they do offer you something unique, because with all of them being in the $40 to $50 range, they are not cheap. So if I'm looking to buy them, I want to make sure I will get good use out of each. So let's just go through each deck a little bit more in depth, shall we? Let's get into the Spark Notes review of each deck, starting with Party Time. It's our black-white deck. Now, Nalia is pretty awesome. And Nalia is awesome because she lets us look at the top card of our library. She lets us play all the rogue, cleric, wizard, warrior party creature types that we could ever want from the top of our library. And then at the beginning of our combat, beginning of combat on our turn, if we have the full party, everything on our board gets a 1/1 counter, and everyone gets Death Touch still in a turn. So it's just huge. She's just this awesome tribal leader, pseudo card draw, card advantage machine. The deck relies on her being out and around and sticking on the battlefield. Beyond her, though, the reason this is the most expensive precon is these 2 cards, Deep Known Terramancer and the enchantment, which I should be able to find it, Black Market Connections. So the reason, Deep Known Terramancer I like more than the enchantment, even though it's $1 less. Either way, this card is really, really good. It's 2 mana, flash. Whenever 1 or more lands ETB under an opponent's control, if they did not play them, so if they like ramp into it with Cultivate or Nature's Lore or something, guess what? You get to go fetch a plains and put it onto the battlefield tapped. You only get to do it once each turn, but the point is, white has been neglected for so long. For whatever reason, Wizards refuse to acknowledge that white had a need for mana or card draw like the game requires, and now we're starting to get these stupid OP cards printed. And here's one that's going to be used in every white deck ever, and that's why it's over $20 right now for pre-order. And then the next card, Black Market Connections. Is it the most OP? Tell me if you think white, or not white, definitely not white. If you think black or blue, or I guess green, like what is the most overpowered color of the 5? I think it's black. One reason, Black Market Connections, black just gets to do everything. They have no limitation. I don't care what you say. When this thing is on the battlefield at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase. So the turn you played, it's a dead play, which I think is why people will not be super or as excited about it. But beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you get to choose 1 or more. So you can do the first, which is create a treasure, lose a life, and or draw a card, lose 2 life, and or create a 3/2 colorless changeling token, lose 3 life. So for up to 6 life, you can treasure, draw a card, create a 3/2 changeling. Just a lot of flexibility, a lot of value. Really strong card. Outside of those new cards, my favorite new card, I think my favorite new card across all the decks, is Multiclass Baldric. Equip creature has a lifelink if it's a cleric, Death Touch if it's a rogue, haste if it's a warrior, flying if it's a wizard, and if you have the full party, you prevent all damage that would be dealt to equip creature. For an artifact that costs 1 and only costs 2 to equip, that's a lot of value because every creature you're putting it on has one of those things, and then every other card in this deck is either part of the party, or if it's one of the new cards, like, for example, I'll eventually find it, Harper, Recruiter, really all the new cards either help you assemble the party or care about giving you additional benefit once you've assembled the party. And then every other reprint in here is a party member of sorts, as well as just having some solid value. They just do the thing. One thing also that Wizards did, which I really like with these precons, is they tailored it back a little bit on the new cards. So we don't get quite as many new cards. We get a few more reprints, which I think goes a long way. We get a reprint of Savine's Reclamation, which is a $7-8 card. You get to return stuff to the battlefield, flashback. There's just a lot of value and potential here, and as you improve the deck, this card will only get better. Skull Clamp, everyone needs Skull Clamp. It's a great card. Glad to see it reprinted here. And then we get like super good cards that have been reprinted a bit, but are still really powerful, like Mikaeus, 8.5 Tails. Who doesn't like 8.5 Tails? Magus of the Balance. I mean, there's just a lot of strong cards. And then really our win con, besides assembling the party and just getting a ton of value, is Pontiff of Blight, giving everything extort, or giving all of our creatures extort, I should say, and just extorting our opponent's death, or Butcher of Malakir, making sure nothing can hang around for like any amount of time in the game. Mana base is not all that exciting, 37 lands. I'd probably cut one land and throw in like a Wrath of God, because this deck does need a bit more interaction. Nalia does give everything Death Touch and 1/1 counters, so that's kind of our way to push through. When everything has Death Touch, that's a pain, really hard to block, and if we're making them bigger, we're going to be hitting hard, right? So board wipes are probably the thought. If we need to wipe, or if we need to interact, it's probably to just hit the reset button, so I'd add one more reset into the deck. But besides that, I really like Party Time. I think the one problem with Party Time is that it's the most expensive deck, but let's just move on to Exit from Exile, because I've just really been enjoying red-green decks a lot. They hit hard. When you can make everything a threat, to me, that's a fun game, where it's not like I either get my combo or I lose. It's like, no, I want to make sure my opponents feel pressure, and I'm doing the thing, and I'm always able to impact my opponent's decision-making in some way, shape, or form. And Faldorn helps with that quite a bit, because whenever we cast a spell from Exile or play a land from Exile, we get a 2/2 wolf along with it, which is potentially a lot of value. And then she says we can, 1, tap, discard a card, exile the top card, you may play it this turn. So she helps her, she supports herself, right? Like that's what a good commander does. Beyond that, we've got some new cards like Green Slime. It's got Foretell, so that's where the exile piece comes in. It has Flash, so when it ETBs, we get to counter target activated or triggered ability from an artifact or enchantment source. And then if we, counter it, guess what? We destroy that permanent, which means we're making our opponents all kinds of sad, as oozes often do in Dungeons and Dragons, which is on flavor. And I always like flavorful plays like that. My other probably favorite creature or new card in this deck is Tlinkali Hunter. Nailed it. It's a 7/7 for 7 mana with Trample. It has Adventure, which lets us exile a card from our graveyard and play it, whatever. Not important. The important part is the actual creature bit it has, which says once each turn, not just ours, once each turn, we may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a creature spell we cast from Exile. We get to play a creature for free from Exile every turn. And green has all kinds of flash, like, oh, Vivian, oh, wow, would you look at that? And then we got Xenagos the Reveler. We got some mana rampants happening. Good reprints of Nature's Lore and 3 Visits. Beast Within. And then probably the best card, I think the card that's the most slept on, it's a few bucks, but Delayed Blast Fireball is awesome. Deals 2 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. If it was cast from Exile, it deals 5 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. One-sided board wipe at instant speed, always good. I think this card is probably my favorite cheap card of all the new cards that are being printed. And then the most expensive reprint, Jessica's Will. I mean, I'm just impressed they reprinted it, to be honest. There you go. Jessica's Will. There's our sweet reprint. The most expensive card in this deck, as we can see, Passionate Archaeologist. It brings the new background card type in, which is pretty awesome. And it's only 1 and a red, which you can't see because my camera's in the way. 1 and a red. Commander creatures you control have, whenever you cast a spell from Exile, weird, why would we do that? Oh, our opponent, or our commander wants us to. Our opponents definitely don't want us to, because if I could just finish reading the card. When you cast a spell from Exile, this creature deals damage equal to the spell's mana value to target opponent. So it's like, hey, I'm going to cast this 5 cost thing, and then hit you for 5, because you were not nice to me last turn and made me sack a treasure for some reason. Nothing exciting here. Land base, it's whatever. We get Kessig Wolf Run, which is kind of cool, some synergy plays here. But it's green, red, beatdowns. Stuff makes our stuff bigger. It helps us get more value from the spells we're casting. Gets a little wide, right? Mana Gorger Hydra just gets huge because it's a Mana Gorger. And at the end of the day, oh, Durnan's kind of cool. We have this new mechanic, Undaunted. I don't know if it's new. It's new to me. Stuff costs 1 less to cast for each opponent, so it just helps generate some value, especially when you're early on in the game. You're able to start getting some card advantage going. Your board built out a little cheaper. Life's good. All in all, though, fairly straightforward. You're just green-red beats. Now my favorite deck, Draconic Dissent, because I love goading, can't help it. And Furcrag helps us goad. For 5 mana, 3/3 Flying Haste. With how cards are being printed, I'm surprised it's not a 7/7 Flying Haste. But hey, 3/3 Flying Haste, I'll take it, that seems fair. Whenever one or more dragons you control attack an opponent, goad target creature that player controls. So he counts himself, that's always nice. So now I'm already seeing, okay, never mind, 3/3, already pretty strong. He comes down, hits someone, and goads a creature they control. That's good for us. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, if that creature had to attack this combat, you put a 1/1 counter on Furcrag, and you draw a card. Yikes. So, we attack, we goad things. Then when those things end up attacking and hitting our opponent, we then get to Furcrag grows and we get card advantage from it. So tons of value, tons of synergy, tons of just good things happening here. I'm excited for this deck too because of my, I'm probably not going to buy this. I'm just buying singles from this because I want to put them in my goad deck. Kaima, I just love my Kaima deck. I think it's the best Precon secondary commander to be printed in the last 25 years because Kaima's awesome, as is goading. Card I'm putting in it, Bothersome Quasit. It's a 3/2 with menace. Goaded creatures your opponents control can't block. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, goad target creature and opponent controls. So, in this deck, when we're casting non-creature spells, we just get to goad as an additional benefit. And then that combat that we go to means we can attack in, hit freely, goad other stuff. There's kind of a snowball effect here. Now, granted, you have to play stuff pre-combat to get the can't block benefit, but well worth it. The most expensive reprint in this deck is Curse of Opulence, which is, I mean, just fantastic. I'm kind of happy they reprinted this because I like incentivizing people to attack. And now we're getting gold tokens to help do other stuff, like play out a new card like Astral Dragon. Astral Dragon is pretty awesome. For 8 mana, yeah, a little expensive, and you're only getting a 4/4 flyer. What else is there to be excited about? Well, every time at ETBs, we get 2 3/3 dragons that are, you know, copies of target non-creature permanent. So, you know, it's like you just copy whatever, and they're 3/3 dragon versions of it. And if you have some kind of flicker effect, which is not the exact purpose of this deck, but clearly this card, a lot of potential, and that's why it's $10 at the moment. Other cards I'm excited to see get reprinted: Compulsive Research, Chain Reaction, Disrupt Decorum, Goad all the things you don't control. Like, what's not to like about that? And then another new card I like, for whatever reason, I just really like Avatar of Slaughter. An 8/8 for 8 mana. All creatures have double strike and attack each combat if able. Like, we have 0 chill in this deck. Everyone is attacking everyone. And then we're just kind of we're not really even doing blue-red things like all these crazy non-creature interactions. Like, there's some bounce, there's some counterplay, there's some board wipey, but really, we kind of want stuff to hang around because we want to goad it. And then if anyone gets out of hand, we have a way to figure out how to handle it, usually by goading their creature and making it attack. And then what I really like about this deck is if you have, or you get to the 1v1, you only have one opponent, you got Stuffy Doll and Brash Taunter, which is a problem for your opponent because we're going to make them attack into them, which they don't want to do, and usually just finish a game by making them hit themselves. And that is hilarious. I'm here for it. Let's do it. The Loot Dispute's also a pretty cool card. When Loot Dispute ETBs, you take the initiative and create a treasure token. Whenever you attack the player who has the initiative, you get to create a treasure token, and as long as you've completed a dungeon, or whenever you complete a dungeon, you get a 5/5 dragon on top of it. It just keeps that action going. Initiative's in the game, now everyone's attacking everyone, even if they're not goaded. And then the last deck, Mind FlayARRRs, which is horror pirate creature types led by Captain Negathrod, and I mean, I don't even know where to begin with this deck, I'm gonna be honest. This is the most, by far, the hardest to pilot. Not because it's like, how do I win? It's like, I need to make sure I don't forget everything I need to keep track of. Captain Negathrod, at the beginning of your end step, choose target artifact or creature card in an opponent's graveyard. That was put there from their library this turn. Put it onto the battlefield under your control. So, right there, that may sound simple. You're going to hear my cat Jax playing with his toys in the background. That may sound simple. You got to track so much, depending on how late we are in the game and how much is happening. You just got to keep track of just about everything, and especially all the new cards, like Aboleth Spawn, for example. The most expensive new card in this deck is another thing that just shows you got to make sure you have your wits about you when you're piloting this thing. 2/3 with Flash. Whenever a creature ETBs under an opponent's control, and it causes a triggered ability of that creature to trigger, you may copy that ability. It's like, I don't even know what I just read there. It's fine. Doesn't matter. Basically, if something ETBs and it gets to do something, you get to also do something. Cool. neat. In this deck, you are not going to have any idea what's happening. Your opponents are going to have no idea what's happening. You're just going to be reading cards over and over, but you're probably doing it in a pirate accent if you're trying to at least stay on flavor. Another example, Grell Philosopher, which has like this toucan Fruit Loops birdhawk nose on it, or beak. That's probably the more proper term, right? But it's a 1/4. Whenever Grell Philosopher ETBs, and at the beginning of your upkeep, each horror you control gains all activated abilities of target artifact and opponent controls till the end of turn. You may spend blue mana as though it were mana of any color to activate those abilities. It's like, what? I'm keeping track of so much stuff. My favorite card in the deck, though, Uchulon. I think that's how you say it. It's a crab ooze horror. It's a star 4 for 3 and a black. Its power is equal to the number of crabs, oozes, and or horrors you control. At the beginning of your end step, exile up to 1 target creature card from an opponent's graveyard. If you do, create a token that's a copy of Uchulon. So you just get like this weird crab ooze army just growing. And they're looking out for each other. I just like token tribal type stuff, and they're kind of like their own tribe in a way. All in all, good reprints. Hullbreaker Horror. We get, what was it? Spellskite. That's a pretty sweet reprint. In Garrick's Wake, not expensive, but powerful. Destroy all creatures you don't control and all planeswalkers you don't control. Got some good mana rocks. Got Lightning Greaves. You definitely need to put a pair of Lightning Greaves in party time. That deck could wildly benefit from that, because you got to keep your commander around. Brainstealer Dragon. Why not? Flying. It's a 6/6 for 7 mana, and has too much text to read in one sitting of game. I'm kidding. Beginning of your end step, exile the top card of each opponent's library. You may play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. If you cast a spell this way, you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. Whenever a non-land permanent an opponent controls, an opponent owns, enters the battlefield under your control, they lose life equal to its mana cost. So now you're exiling cards. You got to track whose you exiled, which usually isn't hard, right? Because they got the same sleeves, and then they lose mana equal to the mana value. It's just a lot. If this is your first commander deck, maybe the only thing I'll say to wrap this up, the only thing I would say is if you're buying your first commander deck ever, this is not the one I would start with, because it's just the most complicated to track and play. If it's your first commander deck ever, Draconic Dissent would be fine. Exit from Exile would probably be the easiest, and then Party Time would be, I think, the most fun, because whenever you're playing, it's just fun to put counters on stuff and attack, and your opponents have a hard time with that. All in all, though, I do think all of these precons are pretty good. If you can get them in the $40 to $50 range a piece, makes sense. Party Time, you're going to be really hard pressed to find this thing for under $50. And if you can, I would not blame you for picking it up. I think that's it for me, folks. I'd love to hear in the comments if you're going to buy any of these, or if you're just buying singles, what cards you're looking to pick up. And if you are going to buy stuff, especially from online, check out Card Kingdom. Use my affiliate link. Really does help. Really appreciate it. But that's going to do it for me, folks. I appreciate you watching. We'll see you in the next one, my friends. Best of luck. Peace.